Come break bread with the Breaking Bread Village. Pass the mic, I've got something to say. Just show up, in this space we're authentic. There's no need to wait. Let's all pass the plate at the Breaking Bread Village.
Hey, welcome back to the Breaking Bread Village. I just want to get started today and just go ahead and bring my guests on. We're going to be talking about the art of storytelling and why it's so important to tell your story. So I'm going to bring him on right now so he can go ahead and introduce himself. But thanks again, you guys, for tuning in again for another conversation on the Breaking Bread Village. Hey, welcome.
Hello. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, sure, for sure. Yeah, I know you're busy, so I appreciate you for taking the time to be here with us today. I want you to go ahead and just introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of get into what you do.
Absolutely. So Murdoch is a purpose-driven, action-oriented servant leader and proud product of Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a Juris Doctorate candidate at the IU McKinney School of Law here in Indianapolis. And I'm also the founder of 3 different companies. One, Murdoch LLC, where our mission is to empower communities to leverage their influence to fuel efforts for Black liberation through people-centric partnerships and community-driven collaborations. I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit organization called Power Moves Only Incorporated, where we're turning entrepreneurs into powerpreneurs, one power move at a time. And lastly, I'm the founder of Circle City Storytellers, the leading digital resource hub for Black storytellers in the Circle City and beyond. And ultimately, I'm in the business of becoming the greatest powerpreneur that my city's ever seen. And this term, powerpreneurship, is
I was just about to ask you what that means, so go ahead and explain that for us.
I think that is directly rooted and tied to the conversation today. So powerpreneurship is the practice, it's the art of strategically leveraging the power in our stories. I believe that especially as Black folks, when we leverage the power in our stories, even when it gets gory, it leads to profit surely. And that profit that I talk about is not about the change in my pocket, but about the change that we can make in our communities. And that's what I believe is rooted in making it make sense, so we can make that sense and that sensational impact all across the senses. And that is what informs my work, the strategic leveraging of the power in our stories within our communities.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, thanks for being here. And I just want to kind of get into the art of storytelling because, I talk to so many people, not just here, just in life. I just love talking to people. And you always hear people's stories. If you go to a nursing home, you may hear somebody, that may be 90 years old and have a story. Or, you have a 5-year-old that has a story, or a woman that was, in a domestic violence relationship or what have you. People have so many stories. So tell me, why it's so important for you to kind of help direct and help people to tell their stories. Tell me why it's so important to you.
No, absolutely. So there's a number of different ways I can go about that. I think at one level, it's understanding that everybody has a story. And really, life is a long narrative, right? Life is one long story. And the extent to which my life intersects with yours is where our stories meet. And so life is all about stories. And so the ability to understand or not understand is also directly correlated to, do I understand why I was or was not placed on this earth at this time in this moment? And so at a high level, independent of personal politics and independent of people's individual beliefs, I think stories are important because they help you to better understand why it is you are, where you are, when you are there. But more specifically to my story, more specifically to where my passion is rooted and where I believe my purpose is aligned, is getting a better understanding of the fact that when we were forcefully, when I say we, I'm talking about Black folks, were forcefully important to this country like property in 1619, we were removed from the context of our stories, right? My oratorical mentor says a text without context is merely a pretext for counting people. And what he was talking about was when you take a phrase, a word, a passage, a chapter, a book, a narrative, a story, outside of the context of the situation in which it was produced, you can con people out of incredible opportunities to see freedom and liberation. So that idea of taking people and treating them like property, treating them like chattel was intentional. But what was also crucial to that system operating the way it continues to operate now is also removing people from the context of their story, of their truth. And what I think is even more ironic than the devilish nature of that system that continues to do justice for the criminals in gray suits and crispy white shirts is this. And it's that even in being removed from the context of our sensational stories, we remain the world's greatest storytellers. The way in which Black stories are commoditized, commercialized, and capitalized upon in this country and beyond is not a coincidence. I think it's simply incredible that our stories, what make us who we are, that give us identity, we were intentionally removed from them, or we were punished for reading. We were punished for having access to literature. We were punished for speaking. That's why spirituals were so incredible that have gone on to influence so many different genres of music, because there's power in exchanging stories. And the system does not want those who are perceived to be powerless to know their power, especially when that power is natural to them, to their experience. And so when I came to understand that in addition to our right to engage in political processes, in addition to our right to economic resources, we were also removed from the context of our identities, our stories, but remain the world's greatest storyteller. I'm like, yo, this whole story thing, there's something to that. There's got to be something to that. And then I'm bringing it home, right? I also understand that we live in a capitalistic society, right? And lack of access to capital in a capitalistic society leaves you feeling it being treated like a lowercase letter. And quite frankly, Black folks have been and continue to be tired of the lack of shift. And part of what our stories do, what I would call social capital, when you leverage them strategically, is you put a caps lock on the system that does justice for those criminals in gray suits and crispy white shirts. And when we are able to leverage them strategically in the context of each other's stories, that's how we make that make sense. That's how we build community. So that's why I think at like a theoretical, abstract, academic level, why it's important, because of where it sits historically. But then like in our historical present and future, why is it important to me? Because I understand where we sit in the power in my story and thus the power of each other's stories too.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's amazing. That you really hit on a lot that we could unpack there in regards to, our stories being taken from us. But we were so resilient and still are very resilient. We're able to, like you said, tell those stories through song, through chants, through so many different things, and just using that rhythm and that love and that passion and that necessity to get the stories out. We found a way to do it. So tell me how you bring that and connect that to the people that come to you today, right now.
No, absolutely. So we can have an understanding, and you're absolutely right. I think too often in these conversations about Black people and the greatness of Black people, we always revere the past without having a critical appreciation for the present and the promise that sits in our future. So yes, we can talk about the Sojourner Truths, the Harriet Tubmans, the Frederick Douglasses, the Phyllis Wheatleys, the so many of these names of our past. And we can even sometimes even talk about, right, the Harriet Tubmans, the Fannie Lou Hamers, the Malcolm X's, the Angela Davises, the Dr. Kings, the Medgar Evers, the James Baldwins. We can talk about the Kwame Tures. We can talk about that. But what we don't talk about is the people like yourself, like right now. We don't talk about the Mark Lamont Hills, the Angela Rye's of the world, the Tamika Mallory's. We don't talk about those people who in this moment, in this movement to make Black Lives Matter more, are telling stories. And they're telling them unapologetically. And they're speaking that truth to power. And so part of what I had to come to grips was understanding that the beauty of Black people does not sit in a book that we read about and we say, I wish we can get back to this. It's no, we are beautiful, bold, and Black right here, right now, in the midst of this Black Lives Matter movement. And sometimes, and I promise it gets to the root of your question, it's just the context that surrounds my answer.
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes we aid, or maybe not aid, sometimes we become complicit unconsciously in the stigmas that surround Black excellence. Like, if we're going to be real.
No, please do. Keep it real. And I was going to say, explain that. Yeah, be real.
If we're going to be real, the pushback that the Black Lives Matter movement gets now, and it's by no means perfect, but neither was the civil rights movement, neither was the anti-apartheid movement. Those are not perfect movements, but because this movement is being led by Black women, there's not some charismatic Black man sitting at the center that looks kind of like me leading that movement, then the world perceives there to be an opportunity for us to problematize it at a rate and a standard that's never been problematized before. And it's because it's decentralized. It's because it's being led by people who historically have been muted. And so when I think about what am I doing in the context of all of that to move towards, and like I said, fueling those efforts of Black liberation that I think is rooted in storytelling, that's why something like a Circle City Storytellers exists, right? And so earlier I mentioned our mission, right? We're the leading digital resource hub for Black storytellers. And so practically, right, we're offering weekly training videos. We just had our bi-weekly branded community building event. We're giving people access to content creation studios. We're putting out monthly educational newsletters. That's what we do practically. But at like a community level, that entity exists to eliminate the barriers that exist to Black folks telling stories. Because if we can come to grips with the fact that stories are what got us here, and we can come to grips with the fact that our stories are part of what make us so dangerous in the eyes of the law, then what are we doing to empower people to tell those stories? And I realized we may have a critical conversation about the fact that Black history is crucial to promise in our future. But are we really addressing the barriers to Black history coming to life? Right? You talked earlier, like the fact that there's so many people who have incredible stories, but don't tell them. Why don't they tell them? Are we having critical conversations about that? And if we do know why, because people have been talking about why they're difficult, what is being done to eliminate those barriers? And so when you talk about Circle City Storytellers specifically, that entity gives training. That entity gives opportunities to build community. That opportunity gives education. That opportunity gives access to resources, because we understand that lack of education about the beauty and the boldness in our Blackness. We understand that lack of connection to other Black people who believe that their Black skin is beautiful, bold, and Black. We understand that lack of access to that capital in this society is what aids in these stories not being told. And so for me, Circle City Storytellers was a response. It was a response to understanding we can problematize these things all day, but are we becoming a part of the healing process to eliminate those barriers? And so I see that
Exactly.
Circle City Storyteller sits there.
Okay, so give me an example of someone that may come to you for help. How would you, if I was to come to you, what would be my purpose in coming? What would I see? Because I'm just trying to for people that want to partake in this, so they understand this process. Because what you're saying is absolutely correct. I mean, we definitely have stories to tell, and we tell them every day, like you said, in one way or the other. But there's different ways to be more strategic and purposeful in our stories and what we share and how we share. So give me an example of, someone that may come to you and how you may help them.
Let me give you three, because I'm just filling this conversation with. I'm gonna give you three.
Go.
So one, right? Let's say that, and I'm in the city. I'm in Indianapolis. I'm based in Indianapolis, right? So let's say I'm a Black professional, and we understand professional and professionalism are Eurocentric terms that are rooted in racism and white supremacy. I'm talking about Black folks who are in some way engaged with the workforce, right? You're doing your 9 to 5 or your 5 to 9. You're hustling. You know what I mean? You're doing what you do to keep to make ends meet. But you also understand there's got to be more to life than this, right? There's got to be something else, right? And you see what's going on around you. I think at local, state, national, global levels, as we're navigating these two pandemics of our present, and you're trying to figure out, how do I better tell my story? And someone recommends you to meet for whatever reason. They recommend you to this brother. So part of what I do is we work together to develop what I call a purpose statement. And this is kind of what Murdoch LLC does. So we definitely go to companies and organizations and we develop growth strategies for communities to develop rooted in storytelling. So we help companies grow using storytelling. Yes. That's okay. It's like at a corporate level, but at a communal, individual level, we'll work on something called a purpose statement to start, right? And why purpose, right? Purpose, as I understand it, is It's rooted in three different questions, right? It's asking you who you are, it's asking you what you're doing, and it's asking you where you're going. And when you know the who, the what, and the where, that in many ways informs the why. And once you know the why, the only question is how, right? And for someone who has, like the people listening, I'm sure, who have the gall, have the audacity to ask the question about there has to be something more here. You don't need help with execution. I think a lot of people just need help with, like, what do I do next? Like, what's the direction? Once I have a directive, I can execute, but what's the directive? And so we have a critical conversation about you as a person. And do you even know why you're here? Right? Because once someone understands why they're in a particular place in space, you experience the world completely different because you have some sort of, I say that direction fuels purpose, and purpose acts as the steering wheel that leads and guides you towards your destiny. And a lot of us are just driving.
Aimlessly,
Listen,
floating around, driving aimlessly. Yes, talk about it. Yes.
The circle system, and we're wasting gas. And we wake up, we go to sleep late, and we wake up early for the sake of going to sleep late and waking up early and wonder why we're always tired but don't have any kind of a result. And it's because you've been driving on I-465 in circles. And you've gone absolutely nowhere. And no one can deny the energy you put into it because your gas tank goes on the E. You got to continue filling up gas and spending money putting gas in that tank. So you're expending resources. You're going to work, but you're not going anywhere. And it's because you have no direction. And so that's one person, right? So there's a person who you're here, you exist, but there's got to be something more. We're going to talk about a purpose statement. So
you're not living, you're just existing. Yeah.
And look, watch this. Mm-hmm. We can just be existing, but many of the people who are existing are trying to survive. We haven't even touched on this idea of thriving. And that's
yes,
right? That there's a spectrum there. This is this spectrum of existence, right? To knowing that you're here and that you're in a space. You're a member of, we can talk, we don't have this isn't the space or capacity, but we can talk about citizenship, right? And what does it mean to even be a part of a community? Because so many of us, like, we just left at a federal level, an administration who literally, in ways that we have not seen in a very long time, put bans on the opportunity for people to become citizens of a community. Citizenship, this idea, and especially when you think about the power of place, especially in the context of the Black experience, we have yet to get our 40 acres because there's power in place, right? And we're also confined to particular places and spaces, to certain boxes, certain industrial complexes, whether it's the school to prison pipeline or the prison industrial complex, we're confined to particular spaces. And we just exited an administration that put very intentional energy in refusing to give people access to become citizens because there's power in place. And so, well, why do I bring it up here? Because I want to go back to these other two examples as well. Part of what I'm understanding is that it's one thing to exist, because existing is understanding that there is a place for me because I'm here. Maybe not, I may not be in the right place that's for me, but there's a place that's for me. Then you get to this idea of surviving, where you're actually exerting effort to try and figure out, I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to pay my bills. I'm trying to provide for my family. I'm trying to provide for the person I love. You're surviving. You're attempting. But there's a whole conversation, y'all, about thriving that's so few and far between we even get to entertain. Too often it's a dream. And I think that dream can become a reality when we have critical conversations about purpose. And so that's the first thing I do. Here's another one though, right? Because everyone is not that person, right? So PMO exists, and I talked to kind of about what we do at a high level. But basically what we do is we come alongside Black students in college, right, who have businesses, and we give them scholarships. Now, before we give them scholarships, we work with them for about 8 weeks over the course of what we call our Powerpreneur Development Program, and help them develop their businesses using Powerpreneurship. And that means we talk to them about how to use storytelling to grow their businesses. And we talk about what I'll call the pillars of Powerpreneurship, right? That being time management, peer mentorship, and affirmation. Why am I bringing this up here? Because you may not be a Black professional who is trying to make it day to day. You may be a young Black person or an older Black person who's in this academic environment. And you're like, I know I'm here for a reason. I know I'm looking to accomplish particular things, but there are hurdles that I'm experiencing, namely capital, access to capital. I already talked about it. Lack of access to capital, capitalist society. Oh, I don't need to go there. And so in that kind of a venue, I'd encourage you to become a part of our PMO community so that we can come alongside you for free and empower you with other young Black voices who've been in a similar position, and then invest in you, right? And give you the resources that you need to make that make sense.
Now, is this what you do through your nonprofit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we just got 501c3 tax accreditation. I know, I don't know if my listeners know anything about that, but that is huge.
Yeah.
Right? That is huge. It puts you in different rooms, and it gets us access to more resources to empower more students. But I wanted to mention one more, right? And this goes again, like I said, I think back to Circle City Storytellers, what I was just kind of really going in depth on. So you got the folks who are trying to make it day to day, right? And I really think we need to have a conversation about purpose. Then there's students who are in this environment in which they're being supported by some kind of an institution. And again, I put supported in quotations because how supported can you be in what are oftentimes predominantly white spaces as young Black students? But then you have other folks who understand the power in their stories, right? Understand they have a story. Oftentimes in Circle City Storytellers, we have a group of, a lot of side hustlers, a lot of solopreneurs, a number of small business owners who have brands, who have companies that they're building. And also understand in this age of marketing and what marketing looks like now, they got to have a story. Like, I know I have one. I know it's essential to my business, but do I know how to tell it? And if I do know how to tell it, in what spaces do I regularly occupy where my story is validated just by nature of who I am? Because too often we have to prove our story is worth telling. Because of what we look like and where we're from. And what CCS looks to do is say, let's scratch this whole proving stage and you just walk in valid. Let's scratch this whole proving stage, you just walk in being affirmed, right? And then in that space, then we can have critical conversations about what makes you telling your story so difficult, which, like I said, goes back to these training videos. You're going to get a training video via our Patreon, our training video each and every week, talking about tangible takeaways that you can apply to your personal life and to your story about how you can better tell it. Or we're having critical conversations in these training videos about why we have difficulty telling our stories more often than not. Right. So that's one thing that we offer through that space.
So let me just ask you this. Is this deep? This sounds like it's deeper than a pitch. You know how people say, you want to make a pitch for your business. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like it's deeper than a pitch. It's almost like the empower, and I hate using empowering because sometimes that's so cliche and it's used so much, but you know what I mean? You're empowering people to be confident and to tell their story and to tell it with, and I want to mention my friend who is the one that kind of gave me your name, Natalie Pipkin, and she is doing, her mobile bookstore. And, I was able to sit in. I had the honor of sitting in of her telling her story one time in regards to, what she's doing. And she's so passionate about it. And that's one part that I think that some people don't quite have, because you can tell she believes in her mission. She believes in her story. So, I just think it's just reminded me of that. And when I heard her tell her story, is that kind of what you help with people to kind of feel more, like you said, affirmed and connected to their own story? Because, it's yours, right? Yes, so tell it. Go ahead.
So now I want to feed off of that, right? So one, Natalie Pipkin is thebomb.com for sure. There's no question about that. She's a member of our community too, and I appreciate her actually making that connection to this, because I couldn't have that kind of It's another example of a Black woman continuing to connect people to the places and spaces they don't know they need, right? And again, that's another narrative. Because there are stories, like I have a story, but then there's also narratives, right? And I think that's also extremely important. What narratives what narratives do we control? What narratives are we complicit in perpetuating simply by nature of not understanding that there's a narrative that exists? And what role do particular narratives play to, use the cliche word, empower us or disempower us, right? So to that point, you're right. And it's more than a pitch. It's a community. Right? It's a resource hub, right? Again, PMO is an 8-week program, right? Power was only an 8-week program. And then you give a scholarship at a banquet. That's a finite tenure. You go through an experience. By the time you're done, you have a product that you present to people and you get something in exchange. And I'm in no way devaluing the value of that, because that changes people's lives. The purpose statement, the development of that takes between 4 and 8 weeks. Again, I'm not devaluing the value of that experience by any stretch of the imagination, because once I understood my purpose, sister, I started talking that talk like I ain't never talked before. So I'm not in any way devaluing that purpose. But the thing about CCS is the only tenure that exists, the only term limit that exists in you being a part of that community is the one that you place on it, right? There's infinite number of things we can talk about week to week about the power in our stories. There are infinite number of topics for community conversations and brand building opportunities that we can have to talk about the power in our stories. There are infinite number of resources and newsletters and books and articles and publications and movies and documentaries to be shared about this. There are infinite ways that you can use content creation studios. There are infinite platforms that we connect Black folks with, want to tell their stories, to be able to share their stories with people. So you're right. It is so much more than a business incubator. It's so much more than a program. We have created a community that was built specifically for Black storytellers in the Circle City and beyond, with the intention of eliminating those barriers to Black folks being able to tell their stories. So you're right. It's so much more than just a pitch.
I mute myself sometimes just to make sure we don't have any feedback. But no, I really like that, because a lot of times, and I'm always talking about representation. I always talk about different seats at the table. And, if people don't give you one, you create your own, you make your own seat, you get your own table, bring a chair up if you need to, whatever you need to do, get your voice heard. So I really appreciate having these type of outlets. And, it's so interesting because when I talk to different people, especially when it comes to, race connected things, right? People who aren't impacted by the system, so to speak, they don't always understand why people need these specific spaces, and, I had a conversation with someone the other day, and like, well, why do they only have, HBCUs, and why do they have this? And I tell the story, I'm like, because we weren't allowed in certain spaces. So we had to create our own. And that's just been throughout history. I mean, we've had to do that forever. So I really appreciate having a space where people can go to feel, seen, feel heard, and also encourage each other. That's what it's all about, that community. So I really do appreciate that in so many different senses of the word.
Yeah, I think that you just hit on something there, and I won't belabor the point. I don't think it's necessary, because I'm sure you shut that down when you were able to respond. I think something else that we need to acknowledge, take the HBCU, for example, right? So people say HBCU, but people don't actually know what those letters mean. So HBCU is a historically Black college or university, right? There are also HSIs, Hispanic Serving Institutions. Here's the thing, right? Historically Black college and university, right? This college, university has historically served certain demographic of people, right? Hispanic Serving Institutions. These are institutions that serve a particular population. You know what we don't have to say when we say a word like Harvard or Columbia, Indiana University, IUPUI, University of Wisconsin? I don't need to call that in HH or whatever. You know why? Because we understand that the standard that was set was to serve a particular kind of a person. And that population is represented at these institutions, right? We have things like the Black Chamber of Commerce, the NAACP, Black student unions. The list goes on. I'm sure there are a number of different examples that are now escaping me. I don't need to say that there is then we have things like the Chamber of Commerce. We have the House of Representatives. We have the Senate. We have these other institutions that are recognized by the majority that don't have these names and labels on them, because they serve, by nature of their creation, particular group of people. And no one questions that, right? The reason why these other entities were developed was because the same reason these other entities were developed. People needed to form a government. So what did they start? Two chambers, the House and the Senate. People needed something to regulate business. They started the Chamber of Commerce. People needed institutions to celebrate music. So you got the VMAs, the Grammys, the Oscars, the Emmys, the Tonys. It seems to me when we develop something that was served for us, which is only created because we understand these other entities were not created to serve us. Because when you read the guiding documents for these entities, the United States Constitution, Declaration of Independence, these documents not only did not mention us when they mentioned some of these other folks, white folks, and not even all white folks, right? We're talking about property owning, again, lack of access to capital. Got to have capital in addition to that. Not only did they not name us, if they did name us, it was not in the context of being human. So why do you think that you walking into these environments where your perspective, your story, your truth and your application and your curriculum and your assignments and your job descriptions, your value is validated? Ours is not. And if you needed these institutions to develop your society, then we need support systems to exist and survive as well. And to be honest with you, that is why, for me, I stopped spending time even trying to articulate why we do them. Because I know there's an understanding. The question does not come from a lack of understanding. Because I had to figure out why I wanted these institutions too, because I wasn't taught to want them. The question lies in a conversation that I, quite frankly, don't have to have. Right? If you want to know, then visit my website. If you want to know, go read the books that I read. Because I have 3 books about me that you removed access from, in addition to the books that were written about you and for you. And again, these are not seated in hate or lack of appreciation for community. But similar to Carter G. Woodson said, there's a difference between appreciation and supremacy. And it's also extremely difficult to be supremacist in a system and in systems that are not empowering you. So I think a lot of these conversations in which people question why are not actually rooted in curiosity. I think they're rooted in an attempt to invalidate the truth in people's experiences and thus their stories. And I have no time or energy for that.
No, I feel you. I will say in particular, this particular person is on a journey, I will say, of self-discovery. So I felt like her questions were sincere, but I get what you're saying, and I totally understand what you're saying, because especially after last summer, with everything that happened last summer, I grew very, very tired of certain conversations. So I totally understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. So I want to get back to the other students. I know you talked about, the one student that's trying to, that you're helping to, get their story out or get their kind of like their brand out and help. Who else do you help? I know you said you had like a couple other students examples.
Yeah. So like I said, I kind of gave the example of the college student who's looking to grow that business and we'll serve them. Gave the example of the professional, the person who's in some form of capacity, just trying to figure out like why I'm here, trying to find that direction. And then focusing on folks who understand there's a sense of direction there, but they're trying to get a better understanding is either how to tell their story or why their story is worth telling. And so those are really the 3 different gaps. So again, the people that are listening, you're trying to figure out how can I tap in with this brother? I mean, one, I think that just if you're a person, especially Black folks, looking to better understand your identity or ways to contribute, like to our community here in the city or beyond, or really, again, like better understand yourself, like that's where you should tap in. Because all of this is rooted, whether we're talking about what we're doing for Black college students, or we're doing it for Black professionals, or what we're doing for like Black storytellers. Like all of that is rooted in the same exact thing. And it's feeling these efforts of Black liberation. And we need to be free. Right. So even if you don't fit into one of those categories, like we need to be free. Something that, and I know you know this, But a lot of people don't. Like when you market to everybody, you end up marketing to nobody at all. We have to be intentional about who we're looking to serve. And so for me, looking at my own experience, I understood that there were these different stages of my life where I felt like I was most disempowered, where I felt like I was most disenfranchised. And also in those same moments, I felt like I had the most opportunity to do something that radically would change how I experienced myself and how people experienced me and how I could pursue my purpose. And so I built around those moments and they turned into these companies. But again, if you don't fit that profile, I sincerely think that anybody and everybody needs a purpose statement, right? Because again, like too many of us are, like it's deep. Like a lot of us are driving in circles and really think we're going somewhere. Like that's the sick and twisted part.
No, it's the truth. That is the truth. I mean, and that's, I was just thinking about this. As you were speaking, that is so, I mean, that's so, it's so deep to me because, this is not just, when people see this, they say, oh, how to tell a story. Oh, okay, that's cool. But it's so much deeper than that. When you talk about liberation, when you talk about identity, when you talk about purpose, when you talk about, just being strategic and purposeful, that's so much deeper. And it's such a self-serving. It really is, in a good way. It's a way to connect with who you are and what are you doing here? And that's the question I ask you all the time. What is your purpose? What are you here for? Are you just kind of aimlessly floating around? What is your goal? And your purpose can change. It doesn't have to stay with you forever. It can be, your purpose can be there for, 5 years or so, and then it kind of shifts into something else. So, that's the thing, that the freedom to know that, okay, I have a purpose. I have a plan. It's okay to change my mind. Like you said, marketing the right people. And that goes back to community, like kind of connecting with the right people to get where you need to go. So I really like that you talk about that. And it's so much deeper than just, and I don't want to say just like that, but, just telling a story, because like you said, we all got stories, but how is that story going to truly identify you? And connect with the people that you're trying to connect with? I mean, that's what I hear when you saying.
Yeah, no, and also I think the other thing that's important, and I mean, we definitely saw this over the last year, navigating COVID, in addition to the other racial pandemic that's existed for 6 centuries, and it's that like people come and go, but then also some people get taken. Like come and go is kind of voluntary, but people get taken, by a number of different things. And so the way I see it, especially as a young Black man, I'm 24. I wasn't even supposed to make it this far, statistically, but then also just the things I've been through. Like it's a blessing. I generally do consider it a blessing, grace and mercy that's brought me to where I am now. And so when I think about it like that, I'm like, yo, I need to make something make sense. Like I need to do something intentional here, because there's so many people who should be here now who are no longer with us. And to what extent do I honor them? And I think in many ways that's rooted in our culture. I think that's rooted in our humanity. And it's this idea of there's a kinship. And that may not be natural to everyone, but I know that it is natural to me and mine. And that kinship and this idea of even after you're gone, I have some kind of a responsibility to honor your legacy. That is also like oral history in our community is extremely important. Like this whole storytelling thing didn't become important because companies and corporations started talking about stories. No, but like the way in which we literally passed traditions. Some people did it in genealogy books. Some people have family books. Other people are able to do it through institutions. You see the same name on buildings, you're like, that's my family, or that was my neighbor. We do it through oral history. There are things you can ask your grandmother or your grandfather that only they can tell you. And then it's like telephone. They tell your mama, and your mama tells you, and then you tell your kid, and your kid tells your kid. And before you know it, it turns into these behaviors. So these stories are so much more than just stories, like you said.
Well, and this goes back to I'm sorry, but this goes back to what you talked about from the beginning, is that, our stories were taken from us, in a sense. We weren't able to communicate them a certain way. So we had to tell them orally. We had to share them through song. We had to share them through a certain way, because that was the only way that we that we had them, because I mean, it's so interesting when I talk to people from different cultures, they can tell me back great. I mean, they know, and then can show you paperwork and and it's like, wow, that's awesome. And a lot of times we don't have that. So yes, I do agree that us being able to tell our stories in a very authentic, genuine way is so important, because that's all we had.
No, to your point, right? Let's take the genealogy piece, right? So I got two sisters. One of them's in high school right now, and shout out to baby girl. And she had to do a genealogy project. So one, that's extremely problematic. She's one of few in her class, and the teachers is like, yeah, we're gonna do the genealogy project. Go back home and talk to your parents, or I think they may have said like you can go to a website and go and look it up to find some information. My baby girl, being the incredible genius that she is, the baby black genius that she is, like, excuse me, there's a couple of barriers to here. I'm not sure about the rest of the class, but we don't really have those things. And even if we did, they were probably burned or deleted or removed, and the teacher, being culturally as incompetent as a lot of these professors are, didn't think about that before the class and figured out a way to blame the black girl for asking a very valid question. Because oftentimes the only thing the system knows how to do when it doesn't know how to react is commit acts of violence, right? And I bring it up here just because we may not have documents, and we may not have the tracings that are on the record, but there's something that ties us. So that the happenstance that we do find a half-burned picture of my great grandmother from my mother's side, I feel something, right? If I see my great uncle from my father's side, I feel something. Or like even here in the city, right? There was a whole movement around Reclaim Indiana Avenue, and yeah, like none of us grew up on Indiana Avenue, but some of our grandparents or our great grandparents had a business on that block. And while that barbershop or that beauty salon or that club or that dentist or that doctor may mean nothing to the majority of people today, because my great grandfather did it or my great grandmother did it, I'm like, you know what? That lives inside of me. And so what am I going to do with that spirit today? It may not mean I'm going to open up a dentistry or open up a doctor's office. I'm going to become a jazz musician. But right now I'm enrolled in a PhD program. Right now, I work at a predominantly white company, and we need an employee resource group. Or I live in a neighborhood that continues to be threatened by gentrification, and we don't have a neighborhood association. And so,
I was about to talk about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we're here, and go ahead. I don't want to cut you off there.
Oh no, you're not cutting me off. I was just thinking about gentrification, and that's why it's so sad when I see a lot of our communities. When they take the buildings away in different places that's been there and as a part historical, and they take them away because of whatever, and that's a whole nother conversation about gentrification, but that's a part of it, taking a part of away legacies and different history. So go ahead.
No, I think to your point though, you're right, it is a different conversation, but it's still related to this conversation. And I say there's a narrative.
Sure.
There's a narrative in this country that continues to enforce displacing particular groups of people, right? And displacement looks a lot of different ways, but this displacement is legally endorsed, right? It is both de jure of the law and then also de facto. It is factually accurate in people's experiences. And in this country, like, segregation is not a thing of the past. Like, we live in one of the most segregated cities in this country.
Well, I'm from Cincinnati, so
I'm sorry. My bad. I'll be forgetting that.
No, that's okay, because I'm just saying I get what you're saying, because Cincinnati is too. I mean, more than what people know. I mean, I literally lived next to a neighborhood that was predominantly black. And you literally, it's train track, and it's a white neighborhood, and we knew at a young age that we really shouldn't walk through there, at a certain time of night, because things change once you cross that street, that railroad track. So yeah, Cincinnati is definitely, because Cincinnati goes right into Kentucky and different areas right there, and just a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, I get it.
and again, I obviously we can talk about this all day. But one other thing I'd say, I'm gonna connect it back to stories, right? But you talked about the railroad tracks, right? How many railroad tracks were built in the middle of our communities to create those divides?
Oh yeah,
And
redlining, all of that.
yes, from railroad tracks to highways, that's also another huge one. And in Indianapolis, it may not be railroad tracks as much it is highways. Like you can literally see it. It is ridiculous, but it's also extremely potent. And why do I share it here? How do we connect it back to stories? And it's because this word we mentioned earlier was narrative, right? There are stories that we each have that are in many ways fueled by our experiences, and we tell them and we share them to inform and to continue building our culture. But there are also narratives. And when you think about the vehicles, watch it, the vehicles that use railroad tracks and highways to transport different kinds of goods, there are also messages that are being transported across different boundaries of identity, boundaries of state lines, boundaries of cultures, boundaries of communities. And what do those narratives mean? And too often, these narratives are used to what? To segregate so that certain people stay on certain sides of the narrative. I mean, certain sides of the railroad track, certain sides of the highway, right? And we can talk about legally, how are those things endorsed with systems like gerrymandering, and how are people elected? These things don't operate in silos. They sit in the context of a number of different struggles. And that, again, I think that just points to the reason why understanding the power in our stories are so important, because it was somebody's pitch that put that railroad track there. It was somebody's pitch that put that highway there. It was somebody's pitch that started that neighborhood organization that started exclusionary policies that didn't let Black folks live there. And when Black folks did live there, led the systems of white flight that led to the defunding, right? Talking about defunding the police, talk about the defunding of school systems that now exclusively serve Black and brown children that can't afford to keep the heat on, that can't afford to put the air on in the middle of the summer, that can't give to. These things were started with pitches and stories that develop narratives that were enforced by resources that create the systems that we see today. Those things are not random, they're relevant. And the extent to which you become familiar with your story and how it does or does not fit in particular narratives, we can begin to fuel efforts for the liberation of our communities.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. That's a, how do I want to say, that's a really good way to bring it home because, of course, it's like we know that, but you don't even think about that yes, I mean, somebody had to pitch that, somebody had to sell that narrative, somebody had to make that make sense to somebody else. Somebody had to connect it some kind of way with someone else for them to say, you know what, you onto something right there. So that's really important. So I love how you brought it back to, and that's why we have to tell our story. And that's everybody. People have to tell their stories to get what you need for your communities, for your like you said, the children in the schools, just the parks, the arts, all of that. We have to tell our stories to be able to get what we need. So that's really why it really gives me something to think about, because it changes the idea of just, oh, let me just talk about what I need or what I want, or let me just talk about my narrative. It's deeper than that. And when you look at it that way, in regards to everything around you came from some type of story. I mean, somebody shared something to be able to get what was needed. Even when you get a new stoplight, where you're trying to come out of my area, you can't come out of my area because it's just too much traffic. If somebody's sold their narrative on why it's important to have that light. And I know that's not related to what we're talking about, but it's the same thing. That's all. Yeah. So I really appreciate you kind of bringing that into full circle for me. Makes perfect sense.
No, I like I said, I appreciate the opportunity. I figured I need to clock in and lock in and make sure I make the most of it. But no, you're right. Like stories make the world go round. Black women make the world go around, but like for real, like stories make the world go round. And the extent to which we don't realize the power in our own is going to have an impact on the time that we do have in this place and space in our communities. It is going to have an impact. And part of what I'm looking to do is someone who understands that is to consistently share that and do it unapologetically as often and individually as I can.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, unapologetically for real. That's how I live my life. You have to just walk in your truth and walk in it proudly and tall. I want you to tell people how they can, because I'm not as familiar with Patreon. I know it's a new thing. You know what? I'm not really in. It's so much stuff on social media, so much stuff on the internet right now that you just have to keep up with. So I need to hire somebody to just do it for me, because it's just a lot. And I'd rather be outside than on the computer, but in today's time, you have to do that. But I want you to tell people how they can tap into your Patreon and like what the cost is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So one, you can definitely on Patreon, on that platform specifically, if you want to tap in with Circle City Storytellers, just type in Circle City Storytellers, it'll pop right up. We only have one membership tier. It's $10 a month, and you get everything I mentioned. Weekly training videos, and right now you inherit like a whole library. We didn't start this yesterday, so you get like a whole library of training videos you get access to. For $10 a month, you get that. Bi-weekly events, you get to come and network and build community. You get monthly educational newsletters. This month's topic is speaking truth to power. So we're going to give you a whole newsletter with resources about books and articles and podcasts and all that jazz. You get access, if you live here in the city, to an exclusive content creation studio. For a lot of us, we have stories to tell, but have no resource to be able to tell them. And so we look to eliminate that barrier, and then also access to paid speaking opportunities. So that's kind of specifically for Circle City Storytellers. But if you just want to connect with me or learn more about the company, it's not just a brother on here talking that talk, but like really does walk that walk. Go to murdochllc.org, watch the documentary, look at our partners, and shoot me an email so we can actually get on Zoom and talk. And you're right, like we were not built to be inside. Literally, that is this term social distancing. We didn't talk a lot about the power of words, but our stories are powerful because they're filled with words, and words have power. But this term social distancing was so toxic to this world. We needed to physically distance, and we actually need to become socially closer because of the physical distance. But that's not what happened. This term social distancing goes out, and it kills people in relationships. And so I want to connect with you in a way that is physically distant, socially proximal, and COVID conscious. So shoot me an email so we can figure out exactly how to do that. I want to help you make it make sense. And lastly, on Instagram, if you're on Instagram or Twitter, I'm hesitant to share that just because, again, I've been talking my talk. I share my truth. And I said, I don't know about you, but I had situations where like people will see me on a platform like this, like, oh my God, I need to have him come and speak or come and do. And they go on Twitter and they see me talking that talk.
Yeah, I have to. Oh, I definitely get in trouble because people assume it's so interesting. People assume what you think and what you believe, right? So, and then when you share your truth about even something in particular, and see, I understand that things have like tiers, you know what I'm saying? Everything is not, this mono, everything, stuff for me is magnifold. I have a lot of layers, but people will hear one thing and come to this whole conclusion about me and my thought process and judge me on it. So I like to be very clear that, I am a very magnified person. I see things in different lights and different perspectives, and don't make assumptions. Don't come in making assumptions. But yes, you can get in trouble sometimes. So I get the idea of not wanting to share. And people, and like I said, we have this right here. I mean, people can go right here
Please do.
And contact you, and that's fine. And then also your email is here as well for them to contact you in regards to this in particular. And, I really encourage people to do it, especially for people who are not always comfortable speaking, and sharing, because there's so many people that have so many gifts and talents and ideas, but they never get it out because they're too afraid, or they, like you said, they don't know that first step. They know because I'm a visual person. So like, I'm always visualizing and seeing things, right? I see these big pictures and I'm like, oh my goodness, I see this. But like, some people need that help with that first step. How do I get started? How do I even tell somebody? How do I put this on paper? You know what I'm saying? Like, I have this big idea, but how do I put it on paper? So I appreciate these type of platforms for people who may not have that ability to put it into words,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're with you every step of the way. You feel me? And we're not going to be domineering. Again, it is what you make it. But know that it's working for a lot of people, and we wanted to make it work for you too.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you for coming on tonight. Again, this is your website. And if you want to connect with Murdoch and his team, here is his email as well. I really appreciate that. I appreciate different ideas. I appreciate giving people a voice and allowing them to be seen. Some people just have not given themselves permission yet to speak and to be seen. So sometimes they need that help, that push. So I appreciate those type of platforms. I appreciate what you're doing. Oh, and how can people, you have a nonprofit, how can they support that?
Yes.
Donations.
Oh, sister, you better tell somebody something. You see, people get on these opportunities. You talk your talk. You don't ask no questions.
Yes. How can they help with that? How can they give?
You can go to PayPal right now.
Okay.
Way to move at gmail.com. I think
put
you
it
can
in there. Put it in there so we can share, so people can support. If you know it, so moved, because I'll definitely share it.
I'm putting in the set right now.
Yeah, awesome.
Also, this is a pointed question. We'll be because we just got that following security accreditation. We'll actually and I'll put it on PayPal. We will actually be launching our online fundraising platform before the end. So we're dropping a little short film. We're opening up for our inaugural Move of the Year banquet. We're having a huge banquet this summer, virtually, obviously. Giving out a batch of scholarships to Black college students, and we're launching our fundraising platform. So again, if you can give there, or you can shoot us an email at that same place and space, and you can connect with us. But there's so many. So thank you for asking that question. Seriously,
sure, yeah, no. Listen, I believe in community. I believe in when one wins, we all win. I'm a firm believer in, if you got $5, $10, it all spends. Put it with it, especially for people that are doing big things. We have to help each other out, because some of us, don't come up with ideas. Some people who never come, and they're okay with that, but they want to just give. You know what I'm saying? Some people just want to help out. They don't want to do it, and that's okay. Just like I don't want to serve in the army, but hey, the people that do it, go for it. That's not my thing. You know what I'm saying? But the people that do it, hey, I appreciate you, do your thing. So everybody has their part to play in this. So, some people want to give. So I will share this also in other spaces. But I appreciate you for coming on. Like I said, I appreciate what you're doing, to benefit people and to empower and to encourage and to uplift and connect and unite. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity. I definitely appreciate you too.
Yes, awesome. Well, you have a great evening, and we'll be in touch, because I want to know more about when you do the virtual platform thingamajigga. Okay?
I got you.
All right. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that was another great conversation. I really liked that. I really enjoyed that. I just like seeing people encourage other people, because we all need somebody, we all need each other, and whenever people feel empowered to have a voice and to be seen, I really appreciate that. So I want to share this again. I want to share the website just one last time, and I'll also put this on another platform. And I also want to put the PayPal for the nonprofit that helps college students, to be able to get their platforms going and kind of, get their story told. I really appreciate this. So here is the email for PayPal if you want to give. So again, I appreciate Murdoch for coming on, and thank you all for watching and listening. This was great. I love it. So have a great evening. All right. Thank you.